Izuna Okafor had everything a boy could ever dream of. He was born into luxury, the only son of Chief Erinzi Okafor, a billionaire industrialist whose empire spanned oil, banking, and real estate. Their mansions sat on acres of land, complete with swimming pools, tennis courts, a private cinema, and fleets of expensive cars lined like soldiers ready for parade. Servants bowed whenever young Izuna walked by, and teachers at his elite school treated him with an indulgence reserved for the children of kings. On the outside, he had the perfect life. But inside, Izuna's soul was restless. Chief Arinzi was a stern man who built his empire with an iron fist. He had grown up poor, clawed his way to wealth, and believed discipline was the only road to success. His philosophy was simple: obedience first, success later. But where he saw structure, Izuna saw chains. Lady Ebere, his mother, was his opposite, gentle, prayerful, and compassionate. She spent her days running a foundation for widows and orphans, always pleading with her husband to soften his heart. To her, Izuna was still a boy who needed patience and love. But patience was running out. From the age of 10, Izuna began showing troubling signs. He bullied other children, sneaked out of school, and lied without remorse. At first, Lady Ebere brushed it off as childish stubbornness. He will grow out of it, she told herself. But Chief Arinzi saw danger. A tree you do not bend when young will grow crooked, he often warned. By 13, Izuna's rebellion took shape. He fell into the wrong company, older boys from the nearby ghetto who sniffed glue and skipped classes. They admired him not for who he was, but for what he had: a rich father, endless pocket money, and the arrogance of privilege. They taught him how to smoke his first joint. He coughed, his chest burning, but when they laughed and clapped him on the back, he grinned. That day, a door opened that would take years to close. Drugs became his escape. Every puff made him feel untouchable, every pill a doorway into a reckless paradise. His grades plummeted, but he didn't care. Teachers complained, his mother wept, his father raged, but Izuna's heart hardened. By 15, his name was whispered among police officers: street fights, vandalism, petty theft. Each time he was caught, his father's influence secured his release. But with each pardon, Izuna's defiance grew. "My father is untouchable," he boasted to his friends. "As long as he is alive, nothing can happen to me." But fate was listening. At 16, Izuna and his gang graduated from petty crimes to something darker: armed robbery. It started with small shops, quick raids that gave them a taste of power. But greed is never satisfied. One humid night, they planned to rob a popular supermarket. The plan was simple: storm in, threaten the cashier with toy guns painted black, grab money, and run. But arrogance made them sloppy. The supermarket's owner had been tipped off. The police were waiting. The night unfolded like a nightmare. Izuna burst into the supermarket with his friends, shouting threats. Shoppers screamed and ducked behind counters. For a moment, the adrenaline thrilled him. He felt alive, powerful. But then, sirens. Red and blue lights flooded the entrance. The air cracked with the shouts of officers. "Drop your weapons! Hands on your heads!" Panic scattered his gang. 2 boys bolted through the back door. Another froze in terror. Izuna tried to run, but the cold steel of a rifle pressed against his chest. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists, biting into his skin. For the first time, Izuna felt fear, raw and unfiltered. The next morning, newspapers carried the story: "Billionaire's son caught in armed robbery. Chief Arinzi's empire trembled with shame." Business partners whispered, enemies gloated, and journalists feasted on the scandal. When Lady Ebere heard the news, she collapsed. "My son," she wailed, clutching her chest. She rushed to the police station only to find Izuna behind bars, his eyes bloodshot, his lips twisted in defiance. Chief Arinze refused to go. "Let him rot," he thundered when Lady Ebere begged him. "For years I have covered his shame. Maybe prison will teach him what I could not, but Lady Ebere could not abandon her only son." Night after night she prayed, her knees sore from hours on the floor. She visited her husband's study, pleading softly. "Arinze, please, he is still our son. Prison will destroy him. He will come out worse." Her persistence wore him down. After a month of cold silence, Chief Arinze finally pulled his strings. Calls were made, bribes exchanged, files misplaced. One morning, Izuna walked free. Lady Ebere wept tears of joy as she embraced him. "Please, my son, change. You have another chance." But Izuna was unmoved. If anything, prison had deepened his pride. He had survived the stench of urine-soaked cells, the jeers of hardened criminals, and the violence of nights without mercy. He came out scarred, but more arrogant. Chief Arinze met him at the mansion's gate. His face was carved with stone. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice low and deadly. "The next time you are caught, Izuna, I will not lift a finger. You will rot in prison until you are forgotten." Izuna smirked. "You think I need you? I can survive without you." The jungle was Izuna's kingdom, a labyrinth of shacks, smoke, and shadows. It wasn't a real jungle of trees and animals, but that was what everyone called it. It was a hideout for misfits, drug addicts, hustlers, and gang boys who had nowhere else to go. The walls were painted with graffiti, the ground littered with broken bottles and cigarette stubs. It stank of cheap gin and burnt hemp. Here Izuna was still a prince. Though his friends had scattered after prison, those who remained looked at him with awe. He was the billionaire's son who dared to live like them. He had tasted prison and survived. He was fearless, or so it seemed. But deep inside, Izuna was tired. Nights of reckless drinking blurred into one another. The high from drugs no longer gave him joy. Instead, it left him hollow. Yet he clung to the jungle because it was the only place he felt accepted. One afternoon, after a heated argument with his father over the phone, Izuna stormed out of the hideout. His chest burned with anger, his head spinning from the pills he had taken earlier. He walked aimlessly down a dusty road, kicking stones until he noticed her. She sat at the roadside beside a small basket filled with sachet water, ground nuts, and some cola nuts. Her dress was faded, torn at the seams but clean. She had tied her hair neatly, though it was frizzy from the sun. Her face glistened with sweat, but her posture carried an odd kind of grace. Izuna slowed his steps. Something about her pulled his attention. She wasn't like the other girls who hovered around the jungle, seeking quick money from boys like him. There was dignity in her struggle. He stopped and exhaled smoke from the half-burnt cigarette in his hand. "Hey," he said casually, expecting her to look up in admiration. She glanced at him once, her eyes calm but unimpressed. Then she turned back to arranging her wares. "Good afternoon." Izuna frowned. Most girls blushed or whispered excitedly when they recognized him, but she hadn't even flinched. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching slightly. "Cindy," she said softly. He smirked. "Do you know who I am?" "I don't care who you are," she replied without looking at him. The words hit him like a slap. No one had ever dared to dismiss him so easily. For a moment he was speechless. Then curiosity lit his eyes. He flicked his cigarette away and sat on a stone beside her. "So, Cindy, why are you selling on the roadside?" Her hands paused. She gave him a quick glance as though deciding whether to answer. "Because I have to eat," she said simply. "That's it?" he pressed. She sighed, her voice tinged with sorrow. "My parents died when I was 14. There was no family to take me in. The streets became my home. I sell what I can every day. Sometimes I eat, sometimes I don't. But at least I am alive." Her honesty pierced him. Izuna had grown up surrounded by gold and silver, yet here was someone who had lost everything and still carried herself with strength. He wanted to laugh it off, but he couldn't. Something about her unsettled him. He found himself coming back the next day, and the day after that. At first, Cindy was indifferent. She thought he was just another street boy with too much time, but he kept returning. He would sit quietly beside her, sometimes buying her entire basket just to make her pack up early. She scolded him for wasting money. "I don't need your pity," she told him once. "I'm not pitying you," he grinned. "I just like your company." Little by little, her walls lowered. They began to talk, long, winding conversations that stretched into dusk. She told him about sleeping under bridges, about nights when hunger gnawed so loudly she could barely sleep. She told him of the girls she had seen lost to prostitution, of the boys who had vanished into crime. "What about you?" she asked one evening, tilting her head. "Why are you always here? You don't look like someone who belongs to the street." Izuna hesitated. For the first time in his life, he felt ashamed. "I don't fit anywhere," he said at last. Cindy studied him. His clothes were expensive even in their careless state. His shoes alone could buy her food for a month. She suspected he came from wealth, but carried a brokenness deeper than poverty. "Tell me the truth," she insisted gently. Izuna sighed, looking away. "My father is a billionaire, but he doesn't trust me. I've wasted my life on drugs, crime, and everything bad. He says the next time I mess up, he'll leave me to rot in jail." Cindy's eyes softened with pity, but not the kind Izuna expected. "So much wealth, yet no peace," she murmured. Her words stung. He wanted to defend himself, to boast of cars and mansions, but something stopped him. Instead, he whispered, "Maybe you're right." Over the weeks, Izuna found himself drawn deeper into Cindy's world. She had nothing, yet she carried herself with dignity. She laughed at his jokes, but she also challenged him. When he smoked in front of her, she frowned. "You're killing yourself," she said. "It makes me feel alive," he retorted. "No," she shook her head firmly. "It makes you forget you're already alive." Her words haunted him long after he left her side. Soon it became a ritual. He would wake up, spend time at the jungle, then sneak off to sit with Cindy. He started skipping drugs just to stay clear-headed while talking to her. For the first time, he discovered the joy of silence, the comfort of being heard. And Cindy, though cautious, began to see beyond the reckless boy. Beneath his scars and arrogance, there was a soul searching for redemption. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with streaks of orange, Izuna found himself staring at her longer than usual. Her laughter rang like music in the dusty air, and his chest tightened with a feeling he had never known. He was falling in love, but he didn't say it yet. He was afraid that someone as pure as Cindy would never accept someone as tainted as him. Little did he know, this fragile girl by the roadside would become the fire that melted his chains, the hand that would drag him from the jungle of destruction into a future he never imagined. Izuna had never believed in love, not the kind that poets wrote about, not the kind that mothers prayed for their children. To him, relationships had always been fleeting. Girls who wanted his father's money, girls who giggled at his rebellion, girls who loved the thrill of danger but never the weight of responsibility. But Cindy was different. She didn't care about his name. She didn't swoon when he bought her entire basket of goods. She didn't melt when he tried to impress her with smooth words. If anything, she seemed immune to his charms. What drew her was not his wealth, but the rare moments when he was vulnerable, when his laughter was real, when his eyes softened instead of flashing with arrogance. And that was what terrified him. For the first time, Izuna wanted to be seen, not for what he had, but for who he could become. The struggle. Yet change was not easy. Even as he spent more time with Cindy, the jungle still called to him. Some nights, the old gang would show up with bottles of cheap alcohol and a pocketful of pills. "Zuna, you've been scarce these days," they teased. "Come on, one last round. Let's feel alive tonight." The temptation clawed at him. His veins remembered the high. His tongue craved the burn of liquor. And sometimes he gave in. But every time he stumbled back to Cindy, his breath reeking of smoke, her disappointment cut deeper than his father's rage ever did. "I thought you wanted more for yourself," she said quietly one evening, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm trying, Cindy," he groaned, burying his face in his hands. "You don't know how hard it is. The streets, the drugs, they're part of me." "They don't have to be," she replied firmly, "but you must choose. No one else can fight your demons for you." He hated her honesty, yet it was the very thing he needed. The test of love. 4 months after they first met, Izuna realized he could no longer imagine his life without Cindy. Her laughter had become his medicine, her words his compass. One evening, as they sat under a tree by the roadside, he took a deep breath and pulled a small box from his pocket. The ring inside was simple, nothing like the diamond-studded treasures his father could buy. He had saved up from odd jobs, and it was all he could afford, but to him it was priceless. His hands trembled as he knelt. "Cindy, marry me." The world seemed to pause. Cindy's lips parted in shock. For a moment her eyes glistened with emotion, but then she shook her head slowly. "Izuna, I can't." His heart dropped. "What? Why?" "Because love alone is not enough," she said firmly. "I will not tie my life to a man still enslaved to destruction. If you want me, you must prove that you want a new life, not just for me, but for yourself." Her words cut like a blade, yet they carried truth. Izuna's voice cracked. "I will change. I swear it. Just give me a chance." Cindy placed her hand gently on his cheek. "Then start now. Quit the jungle. Quit the drugs. Quit everything that has chained you. Only then will I say yes." The breaking point. It wasn't easy. The jungle fought for him. His old friends mocked him. "So you've become a woman's dog now?" "She owns you," they jeered. The one-room apartment Izuna and Cindy shared was far from the mansion he grew up in. The walls were bare, the ceiling leaked when it rained, and the mattress was thin. But for Izuna, it was the first home that felt real. Each morning, he rose before dawn. Sometimes he delivered parcels on a rickety motorcycle for a courier service. Other times, he swept floors at a mechanic workshop, wiping oil from his hands until they cracked. At night, he returned exhausted, his back sore, his pockets almost empty. But Cindy was always waiting. She would serve him a steaming plate of beans or rice, sometimes watered down to stretch for 2 days. She would smile, touch his face, and say, "I'm proud of you." Those words carried him through every struggle. The watching eyes. Unknown to Izuna, his father was watching. Chief Arinzi, though silent, had his ways of keeping tabs on his son. At first, he expected Izuna to relapse within weeks, to crawl back into the jungle. But months passed and the reports were different. "He works hard," one driver whispered. "He no longer drinks," a family spy added. "He's changed." Arinzi didn't believe it. Not yet. One afternoon, fate gave him a chance to see with his own eyes. Driving past a construction site, he slowed his car when he spotted a familiar figure. There was Izuna, shirt soaked with sweat, carrying heavy blocks on his shoulders. His movements were clumsy but determined. Other workers mocked him, calling him "rich boy," but he ignored them. For a long moment, Chief Arinzi sat in his car, watching his only son. A storm of emotions rose within him: anger, regret, disbelief. but above all, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He drove off before Izuna could see him, but his heart was unsettled. The false accusation. Not everyone was pleased with Izuna's change. At the mechanic workshop, some workers resented him. To them, he was still the spoiled billionaire's son playing at being poor. One day, money went missing from the workshop's safe. Fingers immediately pointed at Izuna. Who else could it be? One man sneered. A boy who once robbed supermarkets? The owner, furious, threatened to call the police. Izuna's world spun. His chest tightened as memories of prison returned. He could almost hear the clang of iron doors, smell the stench of urine-soaked cells. Panic gripped him, but Cindy stood firm. She marched into the workshop, her voice steady. Search his bag. Search everything he owns. If you find even 1 naira missing, then call the police. The men ransacked his things, but nothing was found. Hours later, the real thief was caught trying to sneak the money out. Shame washed over the accusers. But for Izuna, the incident was a turning point. He realized that no matter how much he changed, his past would always shadow him, unless he built a new reputation stronger than the old one. Cindy held his hands that night. This is why you must keep going. You can't erase your past, Izuna, but you can write a future that will silence every lie. The mother's plea. Lady Ebere had been following her son's journey with quiet joy. Each time she visited their little apartment, her heart swelled. She saw her son cooking rice, sweeping the floor, laughing with Cindy. One evening, she turned to her husband. Our son has changed. Arinze, don't you see it? Cindy has done what all our wealth could not. Arinze said nothing, sipping his whiskey, but her words echoed in his mind long after she left the room. The father's test chief. Arinze decided to test his son in secret. Through an old business contact, he arranged for Izuna to be offered a low-level job at one of his smaller companies. Izuna accepted without hesitation, not knowing his father's hand was behind it. He arrived early each day, sweeping floors, carrying files, running errands. Unlike before, he didn't complain. He worked as if his life depended on it. One day, the manager deliberately left a bundle of cash unattended in the office. Many employees eyed it greedily, but Izuna didn't touch it. Instead, he locked it in a drawer and reported it. The report reached Chief Arinze. For the first time in years, a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. The call home. That night, Arinze made a decision. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Izuna, he said when his son answered, his voice deep but softer than usual. Come home. The words stunned Izuna. He glanced at Cindy, who clasped his hand tightly. The next day, they walked through the gates of the Okafor mansion. Lady Ebere rushed forward, her tears soaking her son's shirt. But it was Arinze who captured the moment. He stood tall, his eyes fixed on Cindy. He saw the strength in her gaze, the humility in her smile. Then he turned to his son. I once feared you would destroy everything I built, Arinze said slowly. But now I see a man who knows the value of sweat. From tomorrow you will run one of my companies. Do not fail me. Izuna's knees weakened. Cindy's tears flowed freely. For the first time in decades, father and son embraced, and though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. Love had done what wealth never could. He walked past his father without looking back. Lady Ebere's tears fell silently onto the marble floor. The heir to billions had chosen the path of ruin, and the Okafor mansion, once filled with laughter, now echoed with fear of what their only son would become. The first day Izuna walked into the headquarters of Okafor Holdings as managing director of one of the subsidiaries, his heart pounded louder than the polished shoes that echoed against the marble floors. The building towered above the city skyline, its glass windows reflecting power and prestige. Employees lined the corridor, whispering as he passed. Some eyed him with suspicion, others smirked. To many of them, he was still the billionaire's spoiled son, the ex-convict who had wasted his youth. Izuna knew it. He felt their judgment pressing against his back. But this time he did not cower. He straightened his shoulders, recalling Cindy's words. "Your past doesn't define you. Your choices do." He walked into his new office, breathed in deeply, and vowed never to betray the chance his father had given him, the trial of leadership. Running a company was harder than carrying blocks or sweeping workshops. There were deadlines, contracts, board meetings, and staff politics. Izuna had no formal experience. His years of rebellion had robbed him of education. The first months were brutal. He fumbled with presentations, miscalculated figures, and was nearly outmaneuvered by corrupt managers who thought him ignorant. One evening, after a humiliating board meeting, he returned home broken. He dropped into a chair, burying his head in his hands. "I can't do this, Cindy," he groaned. "I'm not like my father. I'm not smart enough. They're laughing at me." Cindy knelt beside him, lifting his chin. "You are smart, Izuna. But intelligence is not everything. You have heart and you have grit. Those are rarer than gold. Don't quit. Learn. Work harder than everyone else. Prove them wrong." Her faith fueled him. He hired tutors, studied late into the night, and asked questions without shame. Slowly, he grew. His ideas began to shine, his decisions carried weight, and even his fiercest critics began to respect him. Cindy's presence remained his anchor. She would often sit in his office during late nights, reading or quietly preparing food. Her calmness reminded him why he fought so hard. In their third year of marriage, Cindy gave birth to their first child, a daughter with her mother's bright eyes. 2 years later, another daughter followed, and then finally, a son. The sound of children's laughter filled their home, softening the scars of the past. Izuna became a different man with his children, gentle, patient, playful. He carried them on his shoulders, told them stories of courage, and vowed they would never walk the paths he once did. Lady Ebere's heart overflowed with gratitude. She often visited, cradling her grandchildren as tears slid down her cheeks. "God has restored what the devil tried to destroy," she whispered. Chief Arinze, though less emotional, found himself lingering longer in their presence. He would sit silently, watching his son play with the children, and a lump would form in his throat. The public recognition years passed. Under Izuna's leadership, the company he managed tripled its revenue. He introduced policies that prioritized workers' welfare, inspired by the struggles he had once endured. Employees began to admire him, calling him the people's boss. One evening at the company's annual gala, Chief Arinze stood to give a speech. The grand hall was filled with businessmen, politicians, and dignitaries. Cameras flashed as his voice echoed through the microphone. "My friends," he began, "for years I feared that my legacy would die with me. My son, Izuna, was lost. He was reckless, wild, and ashamed to my name. I had given up hope. The crowd shifted uneasily. Izuna, sitting at a front table with Cindy, lowered his eyes. But today," Arinze continued, his voice thick with emotion, "I stand before you a grateful man. My son has risen from ashes. He has become a leader, a husband, and a father worthy of honor. And this transformation did not come from me. It came from her." He turned and pointed directly at Cindy. The spotlight followed, casting her in radiant light. "This woman," Arinze declared, "was once a homeless girl. But she is the reason my son lives. She is the reason my family is whole. To her I owe more than all my wealth combined." The hall erupted in applause. Cindy's cheeks burned with tears as Izuna took her hand, holding it tightly. In that moment, all the years of pain, shame, and struggle melted away. Izuna had not only regained his father's pride, he had built a new legacy grounded in love, humility, and redemption. As years turned into decades, people spoke of Cindy not as the homeless girl, but as the woman who rewrote the destiny of a billionaire's son. Their children grew up surrounded not just by wealth, but by the lessons of resilience and faith. And often, when Izuna looked into Cindy's eyes, he whispered, "You saved me." Cindy would smile softly, her voice steady as ever. "No, Izuna. Love saved you. You only needed to believe it."